Welcome, everybody, to Write Better Together. I'm Jon Meyers. Hey, look, everybody, it's Emily Brooks.
Hello, Jon Meyers.
Hi, Emily. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about our favorite advice for writers.
Our all-time favorite?
Well, I actually hate the question of like, what's your favorite all the time. And so it's just one of our favorites.
One of our favorites.
Some of our favorite
the
advice.
first one that came to mind.
Yeah.
So it's kind of then it would be your favorite. All right, continue.
Yeah. So we're going to start with our call to action responses from our listeners.
Oh.
We're going to talk about our big idea, our favorite writing advice.
Yes.
As usual, we're going to have the segment where I try to stump Jon Meyers with an interesting factoid. We're going to have a new call to action. And unfortunately, because I didn't guess the letter last time, we're going to have another mystery bag. Maybe this will be the day.
That's quite the sales job you've given the mystery bag.
Unfortunately, we're doing the mystery bag.
So I heard you got out of your bubble since the last time we met.
Yeah, I had to go get my dog because she was scratching on the door again, like last episode.
A dog appeared.
Oh man. Yes. So okay, does it count if I got out of my bubble but I was still at home?
You went on the roof.
No. I got out of my bubble because we had a birthday party for my husband John. And we didn't realize that we were putting together because when you blend your community together when there's a birthday party. And we didn't realize that we had two friends who didn't know each other, who were very, very opinionated. And from
the opposite side of the opinion?
It depends on what the topic is.
Oh, okay.
But they became friends instantly. But they ended up having like a 10-minute debate on a topic. And my heart rate went up. And they kept saying, and here's the thing, they might listen to this, and I told them this honestly. I was like, no, this is fine. Like they clearly weren't actually angry at each other, and they bonded and talked later about how much they liked each other. But I realized I don't like conflict. And even though there was no anger, there was no hatred, there was none of that, I was so uncomfortable just because I don't like argument. Like I don't like debating. I don't like anything like that. It stresses me out. So I got out of my bubble in that I got out of my comfort zone. And I think that's something that I need to be exposed to more, is like having like disagreements with people, and that it's fine. Like I love that they were able to talk about a disagreement and end the day with going like, hey, so nice to meet you, man.
So you're a fiction writer.
Yeah.
Conflict propels the plot.
Yes, and here's where this attaches to my writing. When my mom read my book, she said, all your characters are too nice. She said they'll get into an argument or disagreement, but like a couple sentences later, they're like, I'm so sorry. I forgive you. It's fine. So yes, it does affect my writing indeed.
And so how did you take that advice?
I tried to make my characters more like strong in their opinions and less willing to change. And you can get along and still not agree with each other, is what I learned.
And two amiable characters can still be in conflict. So
yeah,
anything like an outside force can put them. The weather can make them in conflict with each other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or even just being in a tense situation, you might disagree on the best call to like the best action to move forward with. So how did you get out of your bubble? Because I hinted last week that you had a cheese catastrophe, and I think we all need to know about it.
So when Emily told me that the big idea was going to be
advice,
an impactful piece of writing advice, I immediately thought of I needed to include cheese into this into this illustration, which we'll talk about when we get to the big idea. just how
I'm intrigued.
Emily had the all bird episode, this will be the all cheese episode. And
I'm all for it. I'm good. I like cheese.
And so, but here, so she told me this, and so remember my story in the past. If you're watching these in order, when I went to the farmer's market and I got the pussy willows from the woman who I still don't know what her name was at this point because I did not find the card yet. So at the farmer's market was Nikki Roof from Hilltopper Creamery, and so I bought some Gouda cheese at the farmer market. And during that conversation, here is the actual cheese that I bought right here.
Oh, yum.
It turned into a science lesson, and it was amazing. And Gouda is my favorite cheese. And so, she taught me without, like, it just came out of her. Like, it wasn't like, here, I'm going to teach you something now. It taught me the science of how Gouda is made. And when I was a little kid, we went on a field trip and we went to the cottage cheese factory. So I know how cottage cheese is made, which I'll save that for a future episode. I know
2 cheese episodes.
2 of them. There might be a third one because it deals with a script I'm writing. And so I go on my merry way and I'm driving away and I'm like, you know what? I should have videotaped that. Not that I have a videotape machine. I should have pulled out my phone and recorded what she had said, because that's a good illustration for what my writing advice is going to be. And so I went back and the farmer's market was closed. And so cheese emergency day 1. So then the next day I drive out to the country, to the farm of this undisclosed location. And it's Monday and I forgot that the creamery is closed on Mondays. And then, so I told Emily that, I'm having the cheese emergency, and she's like, what? And I'm like, I can't find the cheese woman. And she's like, cheese woman. I'm like, what do you want to call it? A cheese purveyor? And so I have a personal fromager. There's your word of the day, fromager. And her name is Nikki Roof. And speaking of Emily being out on her roof earlier, her name is Nikki Roof. And so it was closed on Mondays. So day 2 of the cheese emergency. Day 3 of the cheese emergency was the giant storm that never was. And so that was the day we were supposed to record, which we talked about in a previous episode. So it gave me an extra day. So I drove out there again and to the creamery. Cows were running. So that's some sign of something, right? When cows are running across the field. And so, but I had the top down, sun was out, and but cows were running. And I get there and there's a sign that they were in an important cheese meeting.
Oh, wow.
And if you needed them to call the number, well, I was not going to interrupt the important cheese meeting. And so when I got home, I texted her. Well, why didn't you text her in the first place? Because I didn't want to bother her for my podcast and to repeat something that she had already told me on Saturday, and I didn't have the foresight to record it. And so, but I did anyway. And she's like, I'm on vacation. So, regardless, she still complied with my request because she's awesome. And so you will hear during the big idea, and I will tie it into my writing advice recommendation, and you will hear the voice of Nikki Roof explaining to you about cheese, and I'll tell you why that matters.
I love it so much. I love how you got out of your bubble by
3 times.
Like, yeah, like you were persistent. I love it.
I was on a mission.
So all right, so we have a response to our call to action to read. So this is a response to Bob Sine's call to action, which was to step outside, and then the first thing you see to write a log line about it. And our response is from Morgan Stevens.
Hi, Mo.
Hi,
He goes by
fellow.
Mo.
Yes, fellow student, fellow friend, fellow person. And he wrote, when a thunderstorm blows her trash bin away, a soda can must search for a new home in the mysterious forest.
Wow.
And if you listen to last week's episode, this makes me so excited. Ashley also shared a log line about an inanimate object that holds liquids. And just the serendipity of that makes me so happy.
It's because everything's connected by design, yes. And including these two totally random people from, I don't know where Mo lives anymore, but yeah. It's not here. And so 6-7 hours apart.
Yeah. It does tell me there's a lot of trash. If that's that's the first thing that they saw.
She was on a hike in the woods and he was in the forest.
Yeah. And they were both in the woods and saw trash. That's so sad. But awesome log lines came out of it.
That just goes to underscore one of my life tenets. Add this to the page. It doesn't exist yet. Nature is dirty. It's where dirt comes from. You can't wash it because then nature is muddy. So there you go. It's funny that it's National Poetry Week or month. And so Mo's awesome contribution reminded me of Ada Limon's poem called Dead Stars, which I will read to you in a second. Ada Limón is our National Poet Laureate. She's from Kentucky, and I got to meet her twice, actually.
Nice.
And she's 2 years in a row. She's so good that they named her twice, 2 times in a row. And it's not the first time that it's happened. And there's also been a national, there's a secondary position. There's also been one person from Kentucky who was a secondary, he had that, whatever the secondary position was. So he was National Poet Laureate, and then he was also in that secondary position. But I'm not a poet, so I don't know all the details. But I know enough poetry, oddly enough, that I was able to contribute in both of these 2 episodes something poetic. And so Ada Limón has a poem called Dead Stars, and she's an amazing woman. Here is that poem. Out here, there's a bowing, even the trees are doing. Winter's icy hand at the back of all of us. Black bark, slick yellow leaves, a kind of stillness that feels so mute that almost in another year. I am a hearth of spiders these days, a nest of trying. We point out the stars that make Orion as we take out the trash, the rolling containers, a song of suburban thunder. I always try to read poetry, not like a poet. And there's more to that poem, and we'll put it in. We'll put in the notes. We'll put in the show notes.
Lovely, and I that is funny how similar that last part is just so similar to his log line. I love it.
Yeah, and you can to me. So I've seen 2 readings with her. That is always the most memorable poem to me, and of hers, because everyone pulls. So it's this is an important thing that should be in a different big idea. So I'll just give you a tease of it. But these communal moments that we all have, we all know what the sound of that rolling that trash out to the street is. That sounds like thunder. We all know that. Yeah. Larry David talks about when you're packing for a trip. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, white, black, gay, straight, doesn't matter. When you pack for a trip, it's the same thing. You make sure you have enough socks. You make sure you have enough underwear. You make sure you have and so it's these moments that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, I love that. So speaking of writing advice, we want to share some writing advice that has been really meaningful for us. So mine comes from, I actually quoted this video before and then couldn't remember where it was and didn't share it with everybody. But this is Brandon Sanderson has a video called The Lies That, oh no, I just forgot what it's called. I'll put it on the show notes, but The Lies That People Tell You About Writing or something like that. Anyway, in it, he talks about focusing on the journey before the destination. So what he talks about is his journey to becoming a writer. And if you don't know anything about Brandon Sanderson, he wrote 13 books before he finally published one. And he got to a point where he was like, okay, am I going to keep writing even if I never get published? And the answer was yes, because he absolutely loved it. And so the advice that he shares is just something that I've like really kind of clung to for a while and really helped me write my last novel. He says, I think you need to focus, and he's talking to a group of young writers. He says, I think you need to focus on making goals that you have control over. Things like, I am going to keep writing books. I am going to write books that I think are worthy of awards. I am going to write books where each book gets better than the last one. So focusing on things that you can control. He also says, he kind of breaks down the lie of you can do anything. He's like, okay, you can do, there's things about that you can do, and then there are things that are out of your control. So he says, instead of saying I can do anything, say I can do hard things. Doing hard things has intrinsic value, and doing hard things will maybe make me a better person. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have a million thoughts on that. So
I had a feeling.
You gave me goosebumps on that. So first of all, when we make this list of life tenets, and I think I know Emily and I have talked about it privately. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast yet or not, but when she said in a previous episode, or she told me at some point that I can do anything for a specific set aside that you learned in therapy, that I can do anything. Yeah, it was on a podcast that I can do anything for a certain
like
amount of time.
Yeah,
a limited amount of time. That was life changing for me, and because Emily's older than I am, and so I use her as a mentor, and I'm 2 months older, and so I don't think that comes in conflict with what Sanderson says. Even those hard things, you can do the hard things. And then when you the thing you said earlier in that section about keeping your eye on the destination during the journey, right? The thing you said right ahead. Coincidentally,
focus on the journey rather than the destination.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so
he's looking at his bookshelf again.
And look, last time or 2 times ago, or in a previous episode, I forgot to hold up this beautiful book cover of Michael Jamin's A Paper Orchestra. And every one of these memoir stories, he takes you on a journey to a destination, right? They're all based on real things that happen in his life. But if they were just a compelling story that didn't take you anywhere, you would be disappointed as a reader. When you're watching a TV show, you'd be disappointed as a viewer. When you're watching a movie, sometimes you are disappointed in the ending of a movie because you really got into the journey, and then it didn't. There needs to be the grand celebration, the winning whatever. There needs to be, it can be a sad ending too, but it needs to take you to a destination, even though the journey is more important than the destination.
So this is, because you're getting into like when you're structuring a story, yes, there has to be like a destination. Brandon Sanderson is talking about you yourself. Yes, you can have goals, but your goals need to be something that you can control. So there is a destination in that, but the journey has to have intrinsic value. So sometimes we think about as writers like, well, I'm writing today so that one day I'll get published. I'm writing today so that one day I'll be read. And my brother-in-law actually sent me a video on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, but the argument was that if you have intrinsic motivation, that you are going to be more productive because you're not just thinking about, actually sometimes thinking about the goal, the end goal can paralyze you. When I mentioned this in the last episode, but when I sat down to write the last novel that I wrote, I shut all of that down and was like, I'm going to enjoy this journey. This is actually because I had watched this video. It really, really helped me. I'm going to focus on the journey and saying, what can I do? What goals can I achieve? I can write this book and I can make it better than my last book. And I can enjoy the process as much as possible.
The reason I conflate real life advice and to story advice is because I don't have a line for, like, I don't have a hobby. I don't have a line between it's all story.
Yeah.
And so, especially in memoir, like in Jamin's book, there's stories about life. And so, now my brain's going somewhere else about and we'll talk about this in a separate episode because this is a whole big thing about why our brain creates stories. And so that'll be coming soon because it will. And so, but intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, as a academic, in the past when I've taught, we talk about this and we know right away within the first 2 or 3 weeks who the extrinsic motivated students are. And they're always in the minority, but I have to be aware of them. I am not extrinsically motivated. I'm intrinsically motivated because I want to become a better person at all times. Right. And so I'm doing things for the betterment of self. And a lot of people are that way. However, there are categories of people that all they care about is the number. They want the award, they want the reward, and an 89 is better than an 87 to them. And it's not. If you're intrinsically motivated, it's not. But you can't ignore them because that's really how they're motivated. And so as an instructor, you have to be able to motivate both types of people because you want them all across the finish line at the end of 15 weeks. You want them all to be better than you found them. Oh, look at that. There's another life tenet. Leave people better than you found them. That really is one.
Well, I love that.
Go ahead.
Well, so I also like that Sanderson doesn't say that the intrinsic motivation has to be that you're choosing to do something fun. Like, because I think sometimes as teachers, it's like, okay, to intrinsically motivate them, we have to make it fun. And he's saying the intrinsic motivation is, I can do hard things. Hard things are good for me. Hard things make me a better person. So it doesn't have to be fun, but you have to know as you're doing it, like, this is something that's good for me. That said, there are things I think you can do to make writing more enjoyable to yourself, to make it easier to sit down and actually do it.
So I agree. I think they need to be things that matter to the person. And so things that matter to the person, I lean towards those things being fun. And it's criticism that you get sometimes too, that your classes are too fun. Or
how dare you?
When you do exit interviews with the students, they'll be like, this is what I remember. These are the 3 things I remember. And they might be from week 1 or week 3, right? At the end of 15 weeks. And so it mattered to them whether the fun was secondary to the fact that it mattered.
Yes. And I'm not saying that classes shouldn't be fun. But I'm just saying, there are other ways of intrinsically motivating as well, for sure. So one of the things that he says too, he talks about how he used that journey before destination in the book that he wrote, which was The Way of Kings, which ended up being the book that really made him famous. And so he's like, my story has a happy ending. So there can be a happy ending to that. And I just think it's very cool. But also, I think it's okay to dream. It's okay to think about, that would be really awesome that when I do get published, and like that's going to be so cool. But then when you're thinking about your goals, like you can't set a goal like I'm going to be published by January 2025, or I'm going to get an agent by March 20, whatever. Your goals have to be something that you can achieve. And when you focus on that, for me, at least when I've been focusing on that, I have a lot fewer, I have way fewer days where I'm very discouraged, and I have fewer days where I just can't write because I'm focusing on the writing and I'm not focusing on what I haven't achieved yet.
I'm in a total agreement. I personally, this is a personal thing for me. I don't call them goals because after you, but it's fine to call them goals. I'm not criticizing anyone that does. But if you call it a goal, for me, and you attain that goal, you have that high, and then it's like, oh, what's the next goal?
Next,
like,
yeah.
And what's the next goal? And then, and then if you miss the goal, then you don't even have the high, and you still have the pressure of the next goal. Yeah. Where if you focus on process or focus on the system, you still hit those goals. You're just not calling them. You're calling, I don't know, I call them objectives, and but it's semantics, right? And
semantics are important, though.
Okay. Thank you. And so if you're intrinsically motivated to learn this skill or to do this, to become a better person through learning this skill, the goal doesn't become irrelevant. You hit the goal anyway. It becomes a product. The objective becomes a product of the process that you learned during.
Yeah.
There you go.
I like that, because I do think the words that you're thinking, the words that you're using, even if you're not vocally speaking them, do matter in your mental process and how you are, how you're acting on those. So I like that a lot.
Exactly.
So that's mine. That's what helps me in my mental health while I'm pursuing writing, while I'm writing books. So
I guess it's turn for mine.
Yeah.
My impactful writing advice was going to be from Dr. Dale Rigby. He was my memoir professor, among other things. And did you have him for memoir?
I did, and I was actually going to say, so I just shared a book with everybody called The Redeemed Imagination. Most of that book was written in Rigby's class.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And awesome. And so his advice, which I'm totally transparent in the classroom in the past when I've taught, his advice was write a lot about a little. Yes. And so I explained to my students that's what we're doing for the next 15 weeks. One of my students, Faith Harris, shout out to Faith. Hey, Faith. She's now at the University of Chicago, graduating to become a teacher. And one of her life tenets now is write a lot about a little. So it's gone through the generations.
Yes.
And she'll pass it on to her students. And so it's the gift that keeps on giving. And so that's going to be a whole episode at some point. And the piece that I want to talk about today, and you'll see echoes of that in the cheese story, in the cheese illustration, is you have to get out of your bubble to do your research. And whether it's taking Sunday off and going out and driving out to Amish country and talking, well, Amish people would not be talking to you on Sunday, but on a Saturday, and because they'd be in church on Sunday, and taking a Saturday off and talking to Amish people about their life instead of using preconceived notions about the Amish, or you doing internet research. But internet research is important, but it's more important to go talk to the dentist, talk to the lawyer, talk to the prosecutor, I don't know why crime keeps coming to mind, talk to the fromager. And so just for proof of that's really a word, if I can show it, there we go, there's the word. Now that one is backwards, fromager. And if you look at the it's backwards, but if you look at the definition, feminine of fromager, a cheese woman. So it actually is a cheese woman.
Yep,
And,
you actually had a cheese woman. I love it.
So we're gonna show a clip
Yes.
from my personal fromager, Nikki Roof, and while you watch that clip, I'm going to open this and cut open a slice of cheese. So I want you to pay attention, listeners, to what she says the properties of Gouda are. All right, I'm ready for the clip.
Alrighty.
Gouda, or Gouda as we say in the US, is a general term for several cheeses produced in the Dutch style, which will cultivate standard attributes that can be used for both identification and to qualify the quality of the cheese. Gouda is a hard-pressed rinse-curd cheese that by definition should have no more than 39% moisture by weight. The body of this cheese can be anywhere from a near white to yellow color, while having a firm or dense springy texture that is suitable for cutting. Though not required, this style of cheese does allow for holes within the body. They can be anywhere from pinhead to pea-sized, as long as they are distributed in a reasonable, regular manner throughout the interior of the cheese. Other data points that we want to hit include 40 to 50% fat and dry matter, 2.5 to 3.5 salt, and a pH of 4.9 to 5.6. Variety standards are cultivated or met by the make process, as well as the ingredients used in the cheese. Most Goudas in the U.S. are made using pasteurized cow's milk that is acidified by a mesophilic starter containing citrate-positive bacteria. The milk is then coagulated using either an animal or vegetable-based rennet. We will cut the coagulum in larger cubes in order to help retain moisture during the cooking process. After the cook, around 30% of the whey is removed and replaced by water. This helps us control the development of acidity, which will lead to a milder flavor than other cheeses such as a cheddar. This also allows us to retain more moisture in the cheese and produce the ideal texture that we're looking for in the final product. The minimum ripening or aging requirements are 30 days. However, 4 weeks is ideal, and this style of cheese can be aged over a year. The length of aging greatly affects the moisture content and the texture of the final product. A younger cheese will have a higher moisture content and be much more flexible, while an aged cheese will be much drier and crumbly.
So there you go. So,
Awesome.
This piece of cheese that I just sliced off the cube or the block of cheese, she knows that Gouda is my favorite cheese and said, "Hey, we're making Gouda today." And I'm like, "Great, I'll be there next week." And she's like, "No, you won't, because it takes 3 weeks to age." And so, so this was so at that farmer's market, it was 3 weeks plus 4 or 5 days. So as she said, and so now, I see no pinholes with the magnifying glass, and so it shouldn't crumble, according to what she said, and it should be elastic. It should have a proper amount of elasticity, and it is not breaking. It looks elastic, right? Did you know your Gouda could do that? No, because you eat the one with the red wax around it.
Yeah.
And so you've never done that before. So like, how far do I need to go till it'll actually break?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so now it broke, and then it's still not crumbling.
Yeah.
So it's still intact. It's not like in little individual curds. Like cheddar would just crumble into smithereens. Yeah. And but if everything that you just heard Nikki say came out of her mouth in the farmer's market on the Saturday that I told you about at the beginning of the thing, like just like that was normal to talk about, right? And so that's why I said I wish I would have filmed her saying that. And so if it sounded like she was reading off a note cards or something, no, that's all just spills out of her brain because she's a cheese scientist, and that's her life's work. And so that's my writing advice. I will see. Let me see if it's so. Emily's going to.
I'm sorry. So your writing advice is
is actually talk to the experts and
Yes.
leave your bubble and don't do the internet research, because you would never so if I would have written this, like if I was going to write about Gouda, I would have bought Gouda and wrote about the mouthfeel and wrote about the sandwich that I ate, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known any of that about the elasticity, none of that. You can see shades of write a lot about a little in there, because you can take any one of those components. She had like 20 or 30 different components to describe Gouda. You could take one of those and write a short memoir piece on it. And and so in 2 minutes, she gave you 30 things to write about. And so when I write about Gouda, that I'm way more informed than even if I would have done internet research. And if you would have seen it come out of her mouth, had I had the foresight to video that, it would underscore it even more, because it was like when we talked about muffler men before, right? It's one thing knowing about these muffler sculptures and reading a book about them and seeing them. It's totally different if you're watching a muffler man make one of them.
Yes.
And there's nothing to stop you from getting out of your bubble and doing that. People like talking about what they do.
Yeah. And I was just talking with my dad the other day about how we tend to talk about, we generalize people. We'll be like, oh, those millennials or those boomers, and we generalize people, and then we get some information from the internet that we say we can apply to all of that group of people, when we're not getting out of our bubble and actually talking to them. And I think that telling stories is about personalizing things. We're not writing research articles about statistics. Maybe some of us are, and that's fine. But even those articles, those research articles that I have my students write, I tell them, make this personal. Like, don't just give me a statistic. Like, tell me, statistics are important, but tell me a story. And that's what's really going to make the impact. And so I completely agree with you. And I love that advice.
How old are your students?
I have a variety. I'm teaching high schoolers right now, but then I'm also teaching adult students who are finishing their degrees.
And so the people who don't teach my students in the past have always been 18 and 19 years old, because I talked about that before. I love teaching freshmen. And there's been exceptions. There's adult learners in there too, but people that don't teach, that aren't around them, they have the wrongest opinion of 18 and 19-year-olds.
Yeah.
They don't even have a clue.
Yeah, because they're just looking at whatever the internet is telling them about that generation.
Exactly. And I have nothing but praise for 18 and 19-year-olds. They're the future of our country. And if you don't know that, then you're not hanging around them enough. And even people that have an 18 or a 19-year-old, they're basing it on one person and their friend group. But that's totally different than having a sample of 125 people every 15 weeks or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. That's my writing advice for the day.
Hey, Jon Meyers.
Oh, Lord. What? What now? Haven't I learned enough?
So interestingly, we're talking about being teachers. We've talked about it a lot in this episode. So, do you know which author was inspired to write their world famous novel while grading an essay?
Is it on my bookshelf?
We haven't talked about this.
I know that Ricky Gervais' 5th grade English teacher changed his life.
Whoa. You're not supposed to stump me.
in writing a lot about a little. So we'll talk. So I won't tell the story now. But that's how he went from being an F student to an A student. Wow. Writing a lot about a little. So I don't know that. I'm sorry. What am I now? How many am I like? Is it 4-0, 5-0?
Oh, you're so off. You're really, really off. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a fantasy author.
Oh, well, no wonder I don't know. Is it
The most famous fantasy author.
Baum, who wrote Wizard of Oz?
No.
Isn't that the most famous one?
Oh, goodness. It's J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh. Tolkien is more famous. So Lord of the Rings is more famous than Wizard of Oz?
I think probably if you're talking about well-known, no.
Yes.
But if you're talking about a fan base, yes.
They have more rabid fans.
I would say so. So J.R.R. Tolkien was grading an essay, and he got bored, as we do, and flipped the page over and wrote these words, which I'll find on my thing. Wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit," and that was the beginning of
oh my
great
gosh
story.
And I have goosebumps again. So I texted you last night that said Brendan O'Neill answered your thing.
I was going to talk about this.
So this is crazy that everything is connected, people.
Well, this was
because I didn't know she was going to say this.
Well, I didn't either. I changed it because of that conversation. So
okay.
I was talking about how we were talking about holidays on Facebook and weird holidays. And I was like, hey, Tolkien reading day just happened. And Brandon was like, hey, Tolkien went to my school for a little while. And did you see my response?
Mm-hmm.
So Brandon is in Europe. And so, of course, he has connections to Tolkien. But did you know that here in Nashville, we have a connection to Tolkien as well, because they brought his fireplace over to Northwind Manor, which is a community center for artists.
If there's one more connection to something that we've said on the podcast, I'm going to explode. Tune in next week when you can watch me explode.
So have you ever been inspired to write a famous novel based on, like, while you were writing essays?
Oh, yes. So
he's looking at his bookshelf.
No, so this is another episode, but I'll tell half the story. How do you do this? How do you know? So so in college, I'm a screenwriter, right? But in college, the first time when I was the 18 or 19-year-old, I wrote some short stories and stuff, as we all did. And I had started a novel about a bunch of people who lived in a hotel and at the beach at a tourist town, and the residents lived on the top floor, and then there were like some middle kind of frequent guests. They lived in the middle, and then the in and out for the weekend people lived at the bottom, right? And then so I got, I don't know, a couple chapters into it, and then John Irving's Hotel New Hampshire came out, and it was like the same story, right?
Oh, no.
And of course, much better written than I could ever write at that point. And I would still say John Irving could write better than I would do now, but it's not a zero-sum game, and so that doesn't matter. My story would have been different had I finished it. So I took all of those people, the same people, because I love those characters, and I was like, oh, darn it. And I put him in an orphanage. I'm like, no one's going to write about an orphanage. And then Cider House Rules, John Irving writes Cider House Rules, and they're all about these people in different people, but in an orphanage. And then I retired as a novelist at that point.
But did you do it while grading essays? That was the question I asked.
No, I'm telling you about, I was inspired by another writer to write my first two attempts at a novel, not while grading an essay. The novel that I'm actually going to finish now was also not inspired by grading. No one. I've been inspired to pontificate by some of my amazing students' essays, but I've never been inspired to write a novel so far.
Well, maybe one day you'll get bored.
So have you?
No.
Okay.
was just asking a question. I didn't expect an answer.
So in a future episode, we're going to talk about, this will probably be a big idea, why it doesn't matter when you start a story and you find out that then you're writing a movie, and then you're writing Sharknado, and then the next week Sharknado comes out and you didn't know about it.
This is I love that topic. Yes, let's record it now because I love that topic.
And because it doesn't, people think it matters, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
All right.
So if you want to hear that, if you want to hear the conversation where we talk about that, you will want to subscribe. This is part of the episode where I ask you to like and subscribe, write a review. All of those things help other people find us and make sure that you get to hear our future episodes as soon as they come out.
Yep. Do all those things.
Yeah.
Do what she said. Listen to Emily. Do what she says.
All right.
What's
Am I going to win this time?
Oh, it's time for that already? Today flew by.
I know. Oh, no. We didn't do the call to action.
That's why it flew by.
Yes. I got too excited about tying in the ring the bell. Okay. Call to action today is we shared our favorite writing advice and where it came from. So we want you to share your favorite writing advice and where it came from. And if you're also intimidated by the question of favorites, it can just be a favorite. So some piece of meaningful advice to writers that influenced you.
And then we're going to revisit the topic anyway. So then we'll have your responses to add to our responses, which isn't because it's all about you. And so that's perfect.
Yep. All right.
That's a great call to action. So now I get out the mystery bag, in which there are 100 tiles. 98 have letters on them. 2 of them don't. Emily thinks it matters that she doesn't repeat a previous guess. Because
it would be even more boring if I just every week was just like A.
No wagering, people at home. No gambling.
I'm going to guess G.
It'll be so exciting if it's G.
I honestly will be so excited.
You'll explode. We now know 2 different ways.
Run out of the room.
That will explode. It is almost a G. Oh, no. It's a C. Emily, you lost 3. You lost 3 points. Emily is pulling out a Sharpie and drawing a little topper, a serif across the C and turning it into a G. No, Emily, you cannot cheat. It was a C. You lost those points.
This is going to take so long. It's going to take forever.
So in the first episode, I offered the opportunity to retire the tile once it's pulled out.
Yeah.
I did. Can't say I didn't. It's been recorded.
All right. Good
job.
Yeah.
And
we definitely included our listeners this week.
Yep, as always. And thank you everyone, because you've really been commenting, and
yes,
we can't. It's like corralling cats, and I mean that in a loving way. Their comments are here, and they're in the Instagram, and they're in my DMs, and they're in the emails, and they're in the YouTube, and they're in the Facebook. Just put them wherever you want at this point, and at some point we're gonna have a like Bartleby the Scrivener, and he will be able to contain all of these things into one place. We couldn't have done it without you.
Couldn't have done it without you.
There you go.